amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. Hear Me Roar is a terrific book written by Erna Walraven about her time working at Taronga Park Zoo, where she was one of the very, very first female zookeepers. Today, we're lucky enough to have Erna here to talk to us about that time when she struggled to find her feet in an industry mainly populated by men. Yet, it was the animals she was there to look after. So how are a few men telling this determined Dutch woman, who speaks 5 languages, that it was no job for a woman? And how was that going to hold her back? So, welcome, Erna.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be there, Rosemary.
Look, it's just absolutely wonderful to have you, and having read your terrific book, I'm sure our listeners are really going to enjoy this chat. But now, before we actually get into working at Taronga Park Zoo, just tell us a little bit about your early life. I mean, my husband and I were very lucky enough to sail the canals in Holland for a number of years, and know it really, really well. But I gather that you knew those canals particularly well as a child because you were encouraged to swim across them often. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and why that was.
Well, my parents went through the Second World War. I was born in 1952, so not all that long after the end of the Second World War in the Netherlands. And the Netherlands had been occupied for 5 years, from 1940 to 45. And my dad had been in a concentration camp. My mum worked for the underground. But my dad in particular was badly affected, I think. I think now we would call it PTSD, but
Right.
we didn't really know about that. We didn't have words for it.
No.
And there was my sister and me in the family, and my father felt that if we were as tough can be, we would survive the next war if we ever ended up in a concentration camp. So he made me swim across the Rhine at the age of 8.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Eight, missing barges. We slept with 2 blankets only, with windows open in the middle of winter. Luckily, we always had dogs. You could always encourage a German Shepherd to share the bed with you and stay warm.
What part
and
of
maybe
the...
that's where the love of animals started. So yeah, we weren't allowed to have gloves or scarves or beanies, woolen beanies in winter. We had to be really, really tough. So
Gosh.
yeah, that was a bit hard, but I guess it did make me tough in some ways. But I hated cold. I hated it.
Right.
And still do. I can't stand cold.
What part of Holland, or the Netherlands as it's now called, were you brought up in?
Yeah, a beautiful little town called Gorinchem. People always joke it sounds more like a throat illness than the name of a town. And it's on the Rhine. So where the Rhine comes into the Netherlands from Germany,
Yes.
it splits not long after. And then there are into two rivers called the Maas and the Waal.
Right.
And they come together again in about the middle of the Netherlands, and it's called the Merwede, and then streams to Rotterdam and out to the sea.
I know it well.
Right where those two rivers come together is where my town is, and it's a beautiful town with protective walls around it, canals everywhere. It's like a little Amsterdam with gabled houses and terribly pretty.
How beautiful.
But I, of course, thought it was terribly boring when I was a teenager, and I couldn't wait to get out, as, most teenagers want some adventure in life. And I moved to Spain at the age of 18.
Just tell me a little bit about your mother, because, I mean, she was a real hero, wasn't she, during the Second World War?
Yes, she was. I write about her in the book.
Yes.
Because the last chapter I write in Hear Me Roar is about courage.
Yes.
And I'll never have as much courage as my mother had, but she does. It has encouraged me to have courage, I suppose. So she worked in the underground.
Yes.
Her dad was in the underground, and that he was her only contact. They really kept communication as tight as possible.
Right.
And she was also good with languages, and she got a job with the Ortskommandant, and that's the highest German person in the town
Right.
during occupation, as a secretary. And she smuggled a carbon copy of everything she typed for him out in her handbag every day.
What a
So
risk.
that was dangerous enough.
Yes.
But she was also one of those women who smuggled fallen parachutists and Canadian American from one town to the other after curfew in the middle of the night to eventually get back to England and help the fight. So
Right.
yeah, that was extremely dangerous because they
Yeah.
weren't allowed out after dark.
Yes.
There was a curfew. And if you came across any Germans, as soon as it was clear that this man that she was accompanying was an alien soldier, they would have both been shot on this in the spot. So
Gosh,
yeah, she was very brave.
what
So yeah, she used to joke with me all the time as she got older, and I'd say, "Oh, Mum, that's a bit dangerous," and she'd sort of roll
Yes.
her eyes at me and say, "Dangerous, lovey? You don't know nothing about it."
It's where you got your courage from, I would say. What brought you to Australia? I mean, was it love?
It was. It always is, or often is anyway,
Yes.
isn't it? Yes, I met a penniless backpacker whilst I was living in Spain, and he came with a man who had an English girlfriend in the town, another Australian,
Right.
and he was going to start a cycle trip through Europe and would start in Spain and then go north as the weather warmed up, I suppose. Um, but his money hadn't arrived. He had the last bit of his savings sent over by his parents to a bank in Spain, and
Right.
they just kept saying they didn't have it. So his friend's girlfriend asked me to go to the bank with him and help him translate. And yeah, that was it, really. That's how we met. His money arrived eventually, but by then we were both in love, and he had to sell the bike so that he could survive until
Right.
his money finally arrived. And yeah, we'll be nearly 50 years next year.
Oh, look how lovely! But
I
when
know.
you first came to Australia, Erna, you did work because I mean you are obviously incredible with languages, and you worked as an interpreter in a bank. But tell me, whilst you were working at the bank, did you sort of think then that you might like to have a career with animals?
Yeah, I did. So when I came to Australia, I had to sit for the exams called the NATI exams, the National Accreditation for Translators and Interpreters.
Right.
And you sit at the time, I don't know what it's like now, you would sit, apply to do the exam at one of the universities. I've forgotten which one it was. And then you would do either, I don't know, English to German, German to English, and you paid for that. And there'd be another one, Spanish to English and English to Spanish, and another one for French and Dutch, etc. So
Right.
it was quite a bit of money, if I remember. It was like $200, which in the early 1980s, and I didn't have a lot of work. Was a lot of money. So I thought, and I didn't understand Australian colloquialism very well. I mean, people would say things to me that I would just be baffled. Like I'd say, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And they'd say, "Flat out, like a lizard drinking," or and you go, "Well, what does that mean?"
I know.
So there were lots of expressions in
Yes.
Australian English,
It,
less so now, I think, but there were a lot then, and I just didn't have a clue what people were saying. I understood all of the words, but I
yes.
didn't know why would you say that?
I know.
What does it mean?
Extraordinary.
Um,
We had
so
much the same situation when we came out from Ireland, even though we spoke English.
yeah,
There was
that's right.
so many different things that we caught up with. Now, talking of Ireland, Anna, I remember going, my very first visit to a zoo was actually to the Dublin Zoo.
Right.
And I do.
Yep.
I remember feeling very sorry for the animals, particularly sort of the lions and the elephants. But I mean, thankfully, so much has changed now, hasn't it? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
I've now been to Taronga quite a few times, and I absolutely love going there. I mean, apart from anything else, it has one of the very best views in Sydney.
It
So,
does.
but just tell us, you borrowed a dress for your very first interview, because, as you say, you weren't really a dressy person, and in hindsight, I mean, after the fairly hostile reception you got from the male staff, do you wish you'd worn sort of something less feminine, particularly as they gave you sort of a pretty rough tryout, didn't they, that first day?
Yeah. So, well, look, it is really hard to know in those days. So that was probably 1983, I think. And what does a woman wear to a job interview that is for, a fairly robust job that's mostly done by men? So I didn't have a lot of dressy stuff. So I asked Rob's Auntie Jean if I could borrow a dress of hers that I'd seen, and it was sort of like a beigey khaki safari dress with a belt.
Right.
And I thought, well, that should be appropriate,
Yes.
that sort of got me halfway there. So I wore a dress, a bit unusual for me because I'm usually in jeans and quite casual. But yeah, they put me through my paces. The curator had to race back to his home because he thought he'd left the gas on. So there was the head keeper and the assistant head keeper, I suppose, but fairly old-fashioned men who,
Yes.
weren't into this idea that the curator had about employing some diversity in the workplace.
There was certainly no
And
job
in
for a
his
woman.
absence, yeah, that's right, a woman and a foreign one.
Yes.
And so in his absence, they took me down to the loading dock, where all the food comes in for the animals and it's distributed from there.
Yes.
And they got me to pick up 50-kilo bags of animal kibble,
Oh,
like
God.
processed
Yeah.
pellets, like you would do for, cats or dogs, but for a variety of animals. So there I was in my dress heaving these things, and I did it.
I can envisage
Um,
it.
and yeah, and they asked questions like, do you think this is a glamorous job? Or, yeah, how do you think you'd go, I don't know, getting dirty on a
Yes.
daily basis? They were just funny jobs that none of the men that came for a job would have been asked those questions, obviously.
Exactly, and yes, an initiation for a woman. But your first job actually was as a vet's assistant. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, were you frightened at all with any of the animals that you had to treat as a vet's assistant?
Look, venomous snakes, I'm still a bit wary of, which is a good thing to be wary of, really.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so I did, although I passed all my exams for interpreting and translating, and got the job at the Commonwealth Bank. But in the meantime, I had worked on all sorts of things. Hobby farm where they were breeding Irish wolfhounds and whippets,
Right.
and dog washing once a week, and lots of things like that. And I realized I loved, loved, loved animal husbandry, particularly out on the hobby farm. So I did a TAFE course in zookeeping,
All right. Right.
and I did through correspondence to the Netherlands because I found that still easier to do it in Dutch. Some veterinary nursing, and I then had to go for exams to the Netherlands and all of that. So I ended up in the veterinary hospital, and that was absolutely amazing. I mean, you could be dealing with anything from a tiger, and an hour later, a feather-tailed glider weighing 15 grams, or
Wow.
a nestling bird that's fallen out of the nest.
Right.
Or so the variety was just amazing and absolutely wonderful, but also physically demanding work because if the tiger needed to be examined, they would come to the veterinary hospital. So
Yes.
you would go down with the vet would dart the animal with an anesthetic. When it was safe to go in,
Right.
we would go in, and between us, we'd get it on a stretcher and we'd carry it to the car, and then, I'd sit with it in the back under a cargo net, the animal, not me,
Right.
um,
Gosh.
until we got to the veterinary hospital and we'd take it out. And we were lifting weights that
Right.
were enormous. And, you get a stretcher with a 150-kilogram animal into a little
Yes.
van. You can't hold your back exactly as you should. So
No.
it was physically very demanding. A lot of cleaning,
Yes.
a lot of food preparation, but the animals, the variety, I mean, it was just amazing. I just was so, so, so excited and
Oh,
happy with my decision
I can
yeah.
absolutely imagine that. Now you're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Erna Walraven, who's long-time zookeeper at Taronga Park Zoo. Do animals have sort of cultures, Erna?
They do, yeah. Animal definitely have cultures. Culture is really something about the accepted way we do things around here. And animals, you can change cultures sometimes. Sometimes if a culture is very male dominated, say in a primate society, by adding more females, you give them more power,
Right.
and the males might be less violent as a result. There's a bit more control over them. And cultures have been described in scientific papers too. There was a macaque, a Japanese macaque, and I forget her name now, but she was a young girl. But anyway, the researchers wanted to study the group, and in order to do so, they gave them, I think it was sweet potato on a beach,
All right.
where they could observe them out in the open. And, something that's not done much these days with animal studies. You want
Yes.
things to be a bit more, following their natural behavior. But anyway, there was one young female who didn't like the sand on her sweet potato.
Oh,
So she would
I
wade
don't either.
into the water and rinse it off.
All right.
And within a couple of years, the entire group of animals, and they're large groups, like
Yes.
40, 50 animals, were rinsing their sweet potatoes in the water.
How lovely. Oh,
And that is culture, how we do things around here.
yes. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. But I mean, Anna, it is a dangerous job. There's absolutely no doubt. And very, very sadly, a co-worker did lose her life. Don't want you to feel you have to dwell on that too much, but did that shatter your confidence and the other zookeepers' confidence somewhat?
No, it didn't shatter my confidence. It did make us more careful with stuff we did, because also talking about culture yet again, guess the culture was like we were cowboys,
Right.
and I tried to be as much cowboy as the boys. And some of the things we did were dangerous. And the zoo in those days didn't have a lot of money, so a lot of the facilities were built when the zoo opened. And from memory, it was 1916 or 17.
Right.
And I was working there in the early 80s, and behind the scenes, very little had changed. So we were still coping with pretty antiquated equipment behind the scenes.
Right.
But we accepted that because it was such a joy to work there. But once Vicky died, and that was probably also because, the visibility of what could happen as you were operating doors through high, pushing, pulling, and all of that, but pulleys across the ceiling.
Yes.
And she was killed by a tiger because she didn't notice the tiger at the last minute going back in under the metal door that was coming down, that she was bringing down. But yeah, we were doing things like there was one of the things I did whilst working in the hospital, and that was pretty common, you went out for rotation on different divisions so
Yes.
that if the tigers came into the hospital, I knew more about tigers, what their normal routines were, etc. And I was working with the rhinos, and I was taught by the keeper then, a lovely big Welsh guy with bright red hair, that in order to get the rhinos out on display, it was very difficult to get them to move.
Right.
And you sort of had to make a lot of noise and jump around, a lot of movement
Yes.
because their eyesight's not great, to get them to come, and then they would charge you. And then you would run ahead of them in the corridor. As they got up speed, you disappeared between the bars of the corridor where they couldn't get you.
All
And
right.
that was normal. That was
Yes.
an everyday thing to put those animals out onto the display yard.
Right. Right. I mean,
And the fellow I was working with was developing quite a beer gut, and he couldn't get out through the bars anymore. As I was a bit leaner those days, I could. So
yes.
he had to go right to the end and then go around the corner, and let the animal, run out onto the display and close the gate behind it. But yeah, it was those sorts of things we weren't really prepared to do anymore because suddenly,
Yes.
that stuff was really quite exciting.
Exactly. But
Quite exciting, lots of adrenaline. You'd laugh about it. If
yes.
keepers had been doing it like that for a couple of decades, you thought, well, I can do that too. But I think all of those things, we suddenly went, no, we shouldn't be doing this. We don't want to lose anybody else.
Exactly. I mean, you can become complacent, can't you,
Yep,
in any job
and I
that you
think we
do?
were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, look, it can be a bit noisy, sort of, in a zoo, can't you? Because animals having sex, I mean, they are a bit noisy, aren't they?
Yeah, some of them are, especially the lions. Oh my goodness, when the female is in season, they're basically at it
Yeah.
all day, like every
Right.
10 minutes or so. Yeah,
Yeah.
that it just goes on, sometimes for a couple of days. Um, and it could be quite awkward because you'd be sitting in the lunchroom full of men, and you could hear the lions roaring, with pleasure as another orgasm had been achieved,
Right.
presumably.
Yeah.
And and that's a bit awkward when you're in a room full of men who
Yes.
crack jokes about it and things like that. So it was often difficult to find the kind of demeanor that would be more acceptable because, they really treated me quite, not all of them, not
Yeah.
all men, I should say, but quite a lot of them. It was practical jokes, it was put downs, it was, stuff like that all the time.
Trying to make
And
you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Of course, nowadays, I would imagine, that there are more women, that you open the door, in actual fact, for more women to come into being zookeepers, didn't you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. In those days, I was one of the first women in Australia.
Yes.
So to work in that kind of job. Now it's nearly 70-30, I think. Last time I did a bit of a count of Taronga Zoo, it was quite a turnaround. I mean, as things are not as physically demanding, there is no need for
Right.
huge muscles either. I mean, when I worked there was a young man who worked there who was, I'm a big, tall, strong woman. The Dutch were tall, were well
Yes.
built.
Yes.
And there were guys that were, half a head shorter than me and a bit weedy. So it wasn't all about strength. There were way of doing things. And also once more women joined, we were doing things together. Whereas
Right.
before that, if I asked for a hand for anything, I was told if you can't effing do it, you shouldn't effing be here. Um,
Right.
so so that was very common. But those
But
bird seed, for example, that came in, I can't remember now what it was, but probably 30, 40 kilo bags, and then you had to lift it into a hopper that was maybe,
right.
above my head,
Yes.
to shake it out. So, the food hoppers you see in big
You.
animal production areas.
Yes.
So, um, it was, difficult. To clean the giraffe yard, you had to take one of those big garbage bins on wheels when they started to
Right,
come out,
right.
full of animal wet straw, poo,
Yeah.
you name it, a full bin of that, especially if it rained and things got soaked,
Up,
up a
up.
staircase
Oh,
to
God.
put them on the road. So, you sort of had to bounce that behind you every step. That was probably, I don't know,
You certainly
20,
needed to
25
be.
steps to get up there. So every single thing you did was just hard work, hard work. So,
I can imagine it is, but I mean,
but you do get fit.
yeah, and stay fit. I would imagine.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, we are sadly running out of time. But just quickly, do you have a favourite animal?
Ooh, that's like, do you have a favorite child?
Fair enough.
Um,
Don't answer.
so,
All of
whilst I
them.
worked at the zoo, I would have never admitted to have a favorite animal, but I have a favorite group, and I like Australian native mammals.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
There's still a lot to learn about them. They often
Yes,
haven't been studied as much. They're not likely to kill you, which is also very nice in a workday,
that's quite
like,
handy, isn't it? Yes.
yeah, it is. It is. It does make you feel more relaxed about your day. I mean, if you
Yeah,
work with animals that can kill you, you're a little bit tense
you
most of
are.
the day. Like, did I lock this door? Did you know how you sometimes go,
Yep.
did I turn the iron off
I
when I
kn-
stopped ironing? It's
exactly.
that sort of feeling. And, often you go, yeah, yeah, I've done it. I've done it. I don't have to go back. Well, yes, I'm going to go back. I'm just going to check.
Just
Um,
double check. But look,
yeah, so you double check everything. But we now have procedures in place where two keepers always work together,
all
and
right.
there's verbalizing rituals.
Yes,
I have checked your lock. Yes, you have checked my lock before you move on. So,
yep.
a lot of systems have been developed since those early days, and they're modern operations
I can
now,
imagine. So
working for conservation and a better outcome for the animals in the world by hopefully touching people's heart when they see them and they too are willing to do something to save them in the world. So
exactly. And yet, look, I am so impressed with how you made your way. I mean, in what was primarily a man's world, but your mother, who we talked about earlier on, said to you, "Courage is the root of change." Now, you've certainly shown that, and you've also shown, sort of struggling in a man's world, as you say, has given you an insight into debunking sort of sexist biology. I was going to ask you more about that, but we might have to have you back again to go into further about that as well. But tell me, is your book by chance on audio?
it is. It's beautifully narrated by a wonderful woman called Rachel Tidd.
Lovely.
And yep, there's an audio book, an ebook, and obviously a hard copy. So
Wonderful, because as you know, many of our listeners are sight impaired, not all by any means, but many are. So to have it on audio is terrific. Now, Ernia's webpage is www.erna.Walraven, WALRAVEN.com. So www.ERNAWALRAVEN.com. Her book, Hear Me Roar, is available, as we've just heard, on audio, but also ebook and in bookshops. So, I mean, thank you, Ernia, for being, terrific guests of ours today. Thank you, Paul, for producing. And this program has been recorded in the studios of 4RPH Reading Radio in Brisbane for syndication around Australia and will be available on my YouTube channel. Lots to chat about with Rosemary Peterswald. But once again, Ernia, thank you very, very much.
my pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.